This film, made in 1903, recalls the first flight of this primitive biplane, making aviation history. As the two brothers prepare to attempt the first catapulted takeoff, man's age-old dream of flight becomes a reality.
Airplanes are undeniably some of humanity's most astonishing inventions. But not every aircraft was destined for glory. Some vintage flying machines dared to push the limits of engineering, drawing inspiration from the tale of Icarus itself. And just like the boy who flew too close to the sun, they failed in the most spectacular way possible. But how bad could it really get? From a flying boat to the precursor of one of today's most successful airlines. Here are 8 dangerous aircraft that left an unforgettable mark on aviation history. To be fair, early aviation was a hotbed for trial and error. It seemed like, every day, someone was trying something new. Sometimes it worked out, giving us an insane leap in engineering like the DB3, and other times it failed so spectacularly it makes it to this list. A great example was this. For aviation lovers, the Hindenburg disaster is one of those moments that's as sobering as it is unforgettable. But before we get to the fiery wreckage, let's talk about the ship itself, because it was an engineering marvel. The Hindenburg wasn't just an airship, it was a flying giant. At 804 feet long, it was the size of 3 football fields, or nearly as tall as the Eiffel Tower if it were lying down. And with a diameter of 135 feet, it was as wide as a 13-story building is tall. This colossal airship could carry 72 passengers and 61 crew members, offering luxuries like dining rooms, lounges, and, get this, a smoking room. Yes, a smoking room on a hydrogen-filled vessel. Genius, right? Powered by hydrogen, it was the crown jewel of lighter-than-air travel. But everything changed on May 6, 1937, when the unimaginable happened. As the Hindenburg approached its landing in Lakehurst, New Jersey, a small flame ignited, and in seconds the Hindenburg was consumed by flames. To make things worse, the hydrogen made the blaze impossible to stop, and in less than a minute, the giant was reduced to ruins. 36 lives were tragically lost. In the end, the disaster not only claimed lives but also shattered public trust in airships, effectively ending the era of hydrogen-filled giants and paving the way for safer aviation innovations. To this day, the Hindenburg's fiery end remains a chilling reminder of the dangers of pushing technological boundaries. The de Havilland Comet wasn't just an airplane, it was a promise, a sleek silver arrow of a promise that kickstarted the age of jet travel. Debuting in 1952, this beauty stretched 93 feet long with a 115-foot wingspan. That's basically 2 buses end to end. This plane was even wide enough to eclipse a basketball court. But it wasn't just about size. Inside, the Comet offered pure luxury, seating 36 passengers in a space that felt more like a swanky lounge than an aircraft. Oh, and it wasn't just any plane. It was the first commercial jet airliner. But here's the twist. Beneath all that glamour hid a fatal flaw: metal fatigue. Those trendy square windows? Yeah, they became deadly stress points during pressurization at high altitudes. Between 1952 and 1954, 3 catastrophic crashes claimed dozens of lives and shook public trust in jet travel. Luckily, the Comet story didn't end in disaster. Its tragic failures led to breakthroughs in aviation safety, like rounded windows and stricter stress tests. The Comet may have fallen from the skies, but it paved the way for safer flights, proving that sometimes innovation comes at a heartbreaking cost. At first glance, the Convair B-36 Peacemaker is one of those aircraft that grabs your attention from the moment you hear about it. The Convair B-36 Peacemaker was a jaw-dropping behemoth with a 230-foot or 70-meter wingspan, longer than a football field, and a length of 162 feet or 49 meters. This wasn't just a big plane, it was a nuclear-capable Cold War bomber, essentially a flying skyscraper with 6 massive engines. It could carry 15 crew members and deliver nukes across continents, symbolizing America's military might. But despite its size and potential, the B-36 had its fair share of issues. For one, its engine reliability was a constant challenge. You'd think a bomber with nuclear capabilities would at least have an efficient engine, right? Well, the 6 Pratt & Whitney engines that powered the Peacemakers were anything but efficient. To make things worse, the B-36 was a complex aircraft prone to constant maintenance issues. Even when its engines performed as intended, its sheer size made it sluggish and difficult to handle, particularly during takeoff and landing. Although groundbreaking in its time, the B-36 Peacemaker ultimately couldn't keep up as jet technology took off. Its inefficiencies and sluggishness made it a relic almost overnight. It left, however, a powerful legacy as it set the stage for the iconic B-52 Stratofortress, a bomber so formidable it redefined aviation history and remains a symbol of airborne dominance today. The GB Model R wasn't just a racing plane, it was a daredevil's fever dream. Built by the Granville brothers in the 1930s, this teardrop-shaped speed demon was tiny, standing at just 17 feet long with a 25-foot wingspan. Although it was small, its massive radial engine pushed it to over 300 miles per hour, or 480 kilometers per hour. This plane quickly gained infamy as pilots like Jimmy Doolittle raced it to glory. But sadly, flying this plane was no joyride. That's because its stubby wings and twitchy design made it infamously unstable, earning a grim reputation for fatal crashes, including the one that killed the record-setter Russell Boardman. In the end, the GB built a legacy that showed the world that speed without stability was a dangerous gamble. The Martin M130 flying boat was the definition of sky-high absurdity. It was a massive, clunky aircraft with a wingspan of 130 feet. That's longer than a football field. Built in the 1930s for Pan Am, it wasn't just a plane, it was a luxury cruise ship in the clouds. By day, it carried 36 passengers, and by night, it transformed into a flying hotel for 18, complete with lounges, dining rooms, and sleeping quarters. It was the height of opulence, but also the height of danger. Now, here's where it gets wild. This giant was powered by just 4 Pratt & Whitney engines that struggled to lift its colossal frame. Just imagine trying to make a flying bus float. Yeah, it was like that. And in terms of safety, let's just say it wasn't exactly its strong suit. Crashes and even mysterious disappearances like the Hawaiian and Philippine Clippers gave this plane a scary reputation. Sure, sipping wine and dining in the clouds sounded glamorous, but in the back of your mind you knew this flight could very well be your last. It was luxury and risk rolled into one giant, lumbering flying boat. The Leduc 022 was France's bold, experimental attempt to flirt with the future of aviation. It was a sleek, ramjet-powered rocket bird of the 1950s. It screamed innovation, literally, as ramjets only worked at supersonic speeds, meaning this plane needed another aircraft to lug it up to speed before it could even function. You can already see why that was a problem, because its absurdity was just dangerous. Not to mention that at low speeds it was about as controllable as a greased-up soap bar on a water slide. However, despite being a marvel of design and daring, it had no real-world use, essentially making the Leduc 022 a brilliant and practical dead end of aviation dreams. You've heard of the ever-so-impressive Douglas DC-3. Well, here is its ancestor, the Douglas DC-2, which, when it was launched on May 11, 1934, was considered by all to be an ambitious step forward in aviation. Boasting a sleek, cutting-edge design, this aircraft was supposed to be the future of commercial flight, but it had some serious issues. For one, engine fires were a frequent problem, turning each flight into a potential fire hazard. But that wasn't all, because its structural weakness also made it prone to catastrophic failures. Essentially, there was always a chance your flight would be your last. So it was no surprise that despite its potential, the DC-2 was always likened to a high-speed train with the brakes cut. Its shortcomings were hard to ignore, but they were also the catalyst for change, because the failures of the DC-2 forced Douglas to rethink everything, paving the way for the more reliable and iconic DC-3, which would go on to transform the aviation world. Although it looks kind of weird, the Bristol Brabazon was the Titanic of the skies, grand, luxurious, and sadly doomed from the start. Built in 1949, it was a behemoth of ambition, designed to carry passengers in unprecedented comfort, with lounges, dining areas, and even sleeping quarters. But in the end, its very size was its undoing. For something so big, it was massively underpowered, often struggling to get off the ground with its 8 engines. Besides this, the plane also guzzled fuel like there was no tomorrow. And even worse, it was economically unfeasible, flying into an era when airlines needed efficiency, not opulence. Essentially, it was destined to fail and quickly became a cautionary tale on how practicality will always triumph over sheer size. So, what do you think? Were these vintage flying machines doomed from the start or just ahead of their time? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you're into aviation history and its most daring designs, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Stay curious, keep flying, and we'll see you in the skies. And don't forget to check out our video on the DC-3, an aviation legend you won't want to miss.